I'm Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. And right now, we are tracking election 2024 results with presidential primaries happening in 5 states. This is a largest number of states since Super Tuesday. And most polling locations have now closed in Ohio, Florida, and Illinois. Voters have a few more hours in Arizona and Kansas. And here's the thing about tonight. With both Joe Biden and Donald Trump already the presumptive nominees of their parties, you get results like this. NBC News is calling the race in Ohio. President Biden is the winner. No surprise there. And former President Trump is also the winner in the Buckeye State tonight. In Florida, President Biden already won that state the Democratic electorates there with the primary being canceled. But Republicans in Florida did, in fact, hold a primary today with Donald Trump also winning his home state tonight. Now, with this being the case, you might think, so what is all the excitement about today? Well, the attention is on a number of down ballot races that could play a big role come November, like this GOP primary for a Senate seat in Ohio, which the NBC News Decision Desk is expecting to be the most competitive race of the day. Trump is backing businessman Bernie Moreno, and it is still too close to call right now. You can see those results. Moreno with 38.5%. Dolan there, 37.9%. Very, very close race. The winner here will take on incumbent Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown in the general election, and what could be key when it comes to the balance of power in Washington. We're going to be keeping a very close eye on that race throughout the entire night. And NBC's Dasha Burns is in Palm Beach, Florida, where former President Trump voted for himself earlier today. Let's start with what the Trump camp is looking for in Florida tonight. Did they get what they wanted?
Yeah, not a huge surprise. The former president did, in fact, vote for himself. He confirmed that to us just out here a few hours ago. Look, the magic number that we were looking at, and I'm sure the Trump campaign was watching as well, is 93%. And Gadi, why does that matter? That's the number, that is the margin of victory the former president had back in 2020 in the Florida primary. He was an incumbent then, running for re-election. He won with 93% of the vote. Back in 2016, he also swept Florida, beating Marco Rubio 45% to 27%. But the reason we're looking at 93 is because, you're right, the primary is over. We've got our 2 candidates set. It's the shortest primary season we've ever had. It's going to be the longest general election pretty much in history. And so we wanted to see what the outcome would be today in terms of just how much of a lock on the Republican Party here in Florida the former president has. And as I'm looking at our numbers right now, he's winning with about 80% of the vote. And Nikki Haley, who is no longer in the race, getting about 15%. Now, that's obviously nowhere near enough to win, but that's important because it does show that there is a small contingent, a small but significant contingent of GOP voters that are coming out to voice their anti-Trump sentiment, to say, hey, we wanted this primary and we wanted to vote for somebody else. And again, he won. He's a nominee, no question about it. But that does matter, Gadi.
Yeah, 146,000 people there. That's definitely something to take notice of. Trump is once again making headlines right now, this time for comments about Jewish Americans. Can you walk us through what went down there?
Yeah, that's exactly right. He made some comments about how he believes that Jewish Americans who are Democrats are against Israel, that they, quote, hate their religion. And the Anti-Defamation League and a lot of folks in the Democratic Party really took offense to that, saying he was playing into tropes, that those comments were anti-Semitic, and a lot of blowback there. But in the comments from the Trump campaign they received, they're really doubling down, pointing the finger right back at Democrats, saying they don't support Israel enough. So there's really been a lot of back and forth on this as both former President Trump and President Biden try to message on this very sticky issue of the Israel-Hamas war, trying to, bring folks together on a topic that's been very divisive. On the part of President Biden, on the part of former President Trump, he is clearly sticking to some of that controversial and fiery rhetoric, Gadi.
Dasha Burns with something that I will not be forgetting. You said something about time. It was the shortest primaries, longest election ever. It feels like that every single day. Dasha, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Gadi.
And NBC's Jesse Kirsch joins us now from the Moreno Watch Party in Westlake, Ohio, as we await the results in that key Republican primary Senate race. So, Jesse, this seat could change the balance of power in Washington, right? But tonight, this is definitely Trump's primary that he's watching the most. His favorite candidate of winning is that right?
So, Gadi, what we're looking at here is two clearly defined lanes. We're looking at the Trump-backed candidate, Bernie Moreno. That's the watch party we're at right now in the Cleveland suburbs. He had Carrie Lake on the trail with him, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, Governor Kristi Noem, national far-right figures, people who are very closely aligned with former President Donald Trump. They have been backing Bernie Moreno. Also in this campaign, you have State Senator Matt Dolan. He has the endorsement of the state's Governor Mike DeWine, who is more of an old-style establishment Republican figure, if you can think of that, right? What we think of as the traditional Republican wing. And the pitch from the Moreno team has been, do you want more of the old Republican Party, or do you want the new Donald Trump-styled Republican Party? And then you have State Senator Matt Dolan, who, although he has not tried to align himself with the former president on rhetoric and on style, is still said he is someone who supports Trump policy. So even there, you can see some connectivity. We've talked with some voters. Our team has talked with voters in recent days about the importance of an endorsement from the former president in this race. Here's part of what we've heard from some of the people on the trail.
We liked him before his endorsement, frankly, but that really helped.
I think that I was already leaning towards Bernie Moreno even before the Trump endorsement, but I think that the Trump endorsement helps to solidify that maybe that's the vein that the Republican Party is going.
In terms of the endorsement, it makes zero difference to me. I don't trust Trump's criteria at all.
So here's another thing to factor in, Gadi. There are people who our team has heard from on the trail, whether they're backing Bernie Moreno or State Senator Dolan, or we should mention there is also a third candidate in this race, Secretary of State in Ohio, Frank LaRose. But frankly, if you put on the TV over the last couple of days, you would just be seeing ads for Moreno and Dolan. But want to make this point, Gadi. There are some people that have said that if their candidate does not prevail tonight, they are not going to vote for another Republican candidate if that person is the nominee. And that could pose a problem because this is a top pickup opportunity in the fall for Republicans, what is seen as a vulnerable Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown here in Ohio. But if the Republican coalition does not fully coalesce around the nominee, that potentially leaves open the possibility for the Republicans to fall short in the fall. So that's something that we're going to be looking for tomorrow, is how these candidates unite different wings of the party, because the lines have been drawn in the sand heading into primary night, Gadi.
And Jesse, we're looking at the board here. I mean, the difference between the two, it's very, very slight. It's 2,400 or so, 39% Moreno, 37% Dolan. This is neck and neck. This is Trump versus an establishment Republican. What does that we're looking at say about what's going on in Ohio? Of course, the vote count right now, 14% in. Is it way, way, way too early to even look at the tea leaves here, or does this match with some of what you've been hearing on the ground?
I'll leave the tea leaf reading to our decision desk team, Gadi, but I will tell you that we have definitely been seeing a pile of advertisements from both of these camps over the last couple of days. And again, it feels like a two-man race when you turn on the television and just look at the advertisements. Something else that's interesting, a Democratic-affiliated group has put an advertisement on the air that is trying to tout Bernie Moreno as a very much Trump-aligned candidate. And so allies of State Senator Matt Dolan are pointing to that as an indicator Democrats would rather take on Bernie Moreno than State Senator Dolan in the fall. And Dolan is trying to make the pitch, and those around him, including the governor, that he is the person who can win in the fall. So they are trying to make this about November already. And one other stat I want to bring up, our exit polling so far is showing that most of the Republican primary voters here in Ohio today, regardless of how they're voting, most of those voters feel that the next Ohio senator should be supporting former President Donald Trump. And that echoes with what we're seeing from the campaigns, because even though Dolan is trying to distinguish himself in terms of his approach and the way he handles politics, he is still talking about himself as being someone who is cozy with Trump policy. And so there's that connectivity. And so regardless of which wing, if you will, prevails tonight, it's clear that former President Donald Trump's fingerprint is still going to be on the agenda of this candidate moving forward, whoever the winner is tonight, Gadi.
Got it. Jesse Kirsch. And as you were talking, the difference keeps shrinking. It's down at 1,900. Jesse Kirsch, thanks so much. Meanwhile, President Biden was out west campaigning in the swing state of Arizona, stopping in Phoenix today. It's his second stop on a 3-day tour through Arizona and Nevada, where he is looking to try to drum up support among Latino voters. Polls are still open for a few more hours in Arizona. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard has been talking with a lot of Republican primary voters there. Hey, Vaughn.
Hey, Gadi, that's all right. Look, Donald Trump has already effectively secured this Republican nomination. Of course, Nikki Haley already dropped out. That hasn't kept voters from continuing to go to the polls in primaries around the country, including here in Arizona, where, the results could be interesting tonight. Over the course of the last months, voters have been able to mail their ballots back, and this was before Nikki Haley had even dropped out of the race. And particularly in a state like Arizona, where Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden in the 2020 general election by just over 11,000 votes, every vote matters. And, you're going to meet here Tom Winters, one voter who I talked to today, a Republican, who came to cast his ballot for Nikki Haley. Of course, it really doesn't matter because she's already dropped out of the race. But he told me that come November, he intends to vote for Joe Biden over Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump isn't able to win over a great share of Republican voters like Tom Winters, well, that's going to be of concern. At the same time, there are those diehard Republican voters and Trump loyalists here, like the first woman you'll hear from. I want to let you take a listen for yourself.
Well, for one thing, I don't believe he lost in 20, and I don't believe that Kerry lost last time or in 22. But besides that, he's just the only one, if he does win, is considered really the winner, that can really save the country. It's so scary because I'm one of those election deniers, evidently. And so I really don't know what's going to end up happening.
So you voted in a Republican primary.
Yeah.
So who did you vote for?
Nikki Haley.
Even though she's out of the race?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I didn't want to give my vote to Trump.
Are you a Republican normally?
Well, I'd never vote party-wise. I guess it's called Morano.
Now, Gadi, of course, Donald Trump himself today went and voted alongside his wife, the former First Lady Melania Trump, in Florida. He said he voted for himself, but this is going to be a wild, turbulent 7 months. Look, just in the last couple days, over the weekend, former Vice President Mike Pence, his right hand, announced that he is not going to endorse Donald Trump ahead of this November election. So there are a lot of variables at play, and particularly in places like here in Arizona, every vote's going to count, and it's going to be intense campaigning for the Democrats and Republicans as they look to not only take the White House, but also win major congressional seats in the House and the Senate. Gadi.
Vaughn Hilliard in Arizona for us. Thanks so much, Vaughn. And we are getting some new results as they come in from the presidential primaries in Illinois. The NBC decision desk is calling it. With the Democratic presidential primary, obviously President Biden winning there and former President Trump also the winner in Illinois. No surprise there. We've got 95 to 2%. And then Nikki Haley with 2,000 votes there, 31%. Donald Trump, 64%. But again, that is just 1% in, and Illinois being called for the front runner and favorite to win Donald Trump. In Washington, another last-minute race to figure out how to avoid the government shutdown with this deadline coming up this weekend. Now, it looks like some pretty big progress has been made between congressional leaders and President Biden, who struck a deal this morning that would fund the government through September. It's a last-minute breakthrough that came after some fighting over funding for the Department of Homeland Security. But the question is, can they get the deal done before Saturday? NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor has more.
Hey, Gadi. Well, Congress is racing against the clock to avert a government shutdown that would take effect on Friday at midnight. Congressional leaders and the White House say they have a deal to fund what would be the remaining 2/3 of the federal government after they passed the first tranche earlier this month. That includes funding for the Departments of State, Department of Defense, Department of Labor, HHS, as well as Homeland Security. Now, the Homeland Security piece, the DHS funding, was the most contentious part of this negotiation, which dragged it out for several more days, longer than they had expected. expected it to. They finally inked that deal last night and announced it today. Democrats, including and the White House, had demanded more funding for border agents, more funding for immigration enforcement, which is something that Republicans have wanted, but Republicans have had their own demands. And once lawmakers get text, it is expected that there will be 72 hours before Speaker Johnson calls a vote in the House. He has signaled to lawmakers that he's going to give them that time to read the bill first, and then it would have to go to the Senate, where they would need unanimous consent, all 100 senators, to do anything quickly. Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, pleaded with members to move this along fast. Let's take a listen to what he said.
Senate and House appropriators are now working swiftly to turn this agreement into legislative text as soon as possible, so members can review, finalize, and ultimately take a vote in the coming days. Once the House sends us a funding package, I will put it on the floor of the Senate without delay. Now, it's a very good sign that we begin the week by announcing this agreement, but I want to be clear, there's a lot of work to do in the coming days.
And of course, those comments were echoed by Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, the top Republican, who has also endorsed this government funding deal. The Senate's going to have a hard time getting unanimous consent to pass this bill quickly because there is objection, there's real opposition from some right-leaning members of the Republican Party who don't like how much the government is spending. But there's also the fact that Congress is on the brink of a 2-week recess once they finish this up, which historically has tended to motivate members to move things along, to speed votes along. And finally, this is halfway through the fiscal year. In just 6 months, just over 6 months, another deadline comes up to fund the government on September 30th, just about 6 weeks or so before the presidential election, when they will have to strike a deal or face a shutdown. Gadi.
Sahil Kapoor, thanks so much. And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, new body cam footage that may help solve the mystery of a missing college student. NBC's Kathy Park joins us in a few minutes from Nashville with the very latest. Plus, massive news on the immigration front. The Supreme Court clears the way for Texas to start enforcing a controversial law allowing local cops to arrest migrants for crossing the border illegally. This might not be the end of the legal fight just yet. We're going to explain in just a bit. And tonight in the Future of Everything, we're talking all things Bitcoin, because despite all the crypto haters, it seems to be roaring back. How the new hub for the cryptocurrency isn't Silicon Valley, but deep in the heart of Texas. That's later this hour. So stay tuned.
Bitcoin was founded in 2009. A lot's happened post-financial crisis. Austin was already emerging as that tech center, and enter Bitcoin, and it just became the logical home.
Hey, welcome back. And here are some of the other headlines we're watching right now. In Miami, ex-Donald Trump advisor Peter Navarro reported to prison today. He was convicted of contempt of Congress last year and is set to serve 4 months. Here's what he said before he turned himself in.
I will walk proudly in there and do my time. I will gather strength from this. Donald John Trump is the nominee for the Republican presidential campaign.
A new report says the number of medication abortions in 2023 went up by about 150,000 from the year before. It was the first full year of data since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Medication abortion has been available in the United States since the year 2000, but it's currently being challenged in court. And the FBI is out with new statistics that they say show the U.S. crime rate is dropping. In 2023, compared to the year before, they are reporting a 13% drop in murders, a 6% decline in reported violent crime, and a 4% drop in reported property crime. That's based on statistics from 13,000 law enforcement agencies, which covers about 82% of the country. And there is truly no place like home for a pair of Dorothy's ruby red slippers from The Wizard of Oz that were stolen from a Judy Garland museum nearly 20 years ago. The FBI returned them to their rightful owner in a secret ceremony last month. This information comes as a grand jury indicted a second person connected to that theft. And a big shakeup at the company behind some of the biggest ice cream brands in the world. The company Unilever is spinning off its ice cream companies into a separate business, and they own currently 5 of the top 10 selling ice cream brands, including Ben & Jerry's and Magnum. Tonight in Tennessee, we have new body cam footage showing a missing college student just minutes before he disappeared in Nashville. Take a look.
How you doing, sir? I'm good. How are you? Good.
I'm good. How are you? That scene happening around 10 o'clock on March 8th. 22-year-old Riley Strain is the one that you see right there greeting the police officer wearing the body cam, who later said the University of Missouri student did not act like anything was wrong. Now, about 5 minutes before that video was taken, this video was taken along some street cameras that caught Riley stumbling on the same road there. He was last seen at the country singer Luke Bryan's bar before getting kicked out. He was wearing a black and brown shirt, blue jeans, brown boots, and a black Apple Watch. Over the weekend, Nashville police say Riley's bank card was found near the river. NBC News correspondent Kathy Park joins us now. Kathy, what's the latest here?
Hey there, Gadi. Yeah, the mystery really is deepening over the disappearance of Riley Strain. It has been over a week now. His family, they've been on the ground ever since he went missing, and still no trace of him. We heard from Metro Nashville Police earlier today. They say this is not a criminal investigation. No evidence that they've collected so far seem to suggest that's the case, but they will continue to press ahead. This is still very much an active investigation. You probably have seen the footage released not too long ago, body camera footage. It shows Riley Strain having a brief interaction with an officer, a Nashville PD officer, the night he went missing. He doesn't appear distressed. He actually says, "I'm doing okay," and he kind of walks away out of the frame around 9:52 p.m. Police also stressed that he wasn't running away. It didn't appear like he was being chased. So all these things are something that they're taking a very close watch on, looking closely at. Meanwhile, Gadi, there are tons of volunteers who are helping with the search efforts as well. The United Cajun Navy, we heard from them earlier today. They are mobilizing in the coming days. They're bringing a boat. They're searching along the Cumberland River. That was the last location where Riley Strain was seen. So that is where a lot of the search efforts have been focused over the last couple of days.
In some of those images that we're seeing in that body cam footage, it looks like he's walking by the river. We know that the ATM card was found next to the river. Is it found in the same area there?
Yeah, so it was found, according to authorities, the embankment right by the Cumberland River. So the search efforts really has been centralized in that area. His cell phone also was pinged in that area. There were also security cameras that surfaced over the past couple of days, and it shows him walking within a 1 mile radius, pretty much in the Broadway area. This is downtown Nashville. So all the sequences seem to kind of line up, but there is a reason why they're focusing on that area. But when you mentioned the bank card, it was actually two women here from Nashville, volunteers, who decided to take it upon themselves. They were tired of standing by, not being able to help. So they went on the embankment, kind of went through all the debris, the garbage, and they happened to find that bank card on Sunday, and then they reported it to authorities. And that was a critical clue. And Riley's parents did confirm that was indeed his bank card.
Yeah, a huge help. And that touches on something else that's kind of odd about this. You mentioned the Cajun Navy. You see them sometimes after a disaster. But this case seems to be bringing out a lot of people to help. I've seen on TikTok, a lot of TikTokers are headed to that area to try to search. What is going on there?
Yeah, there has certainly been a lot of attention on this story. I think there are a lot of questions about this. The guy was 6'7". We heard from his family member that he's a tall guy. He stands out. And it's just crazy to think that no one has seen him. And there's still no trace of him. We found the bank card, but that's it. And then we saw the surveillance footage, but that's it. And once again, officials are saying there's no sign of foul play. So family members are not convinced that anything has gone wrong. They're hopeful that their son will be found alive. But yeah, you mentioned the United Cajun Navy. They're also here on the ground. They plan on bringing boats into the area. They plan on doing their own search efforts. They are going to be working closely with authorities, Nashville police, as well as they kind of push forward. Gadi?
Hopefully he's found soon. Kathy Park, thank you so much. And it looks like the father of a school shooter, James Crumbley, is back in the news tonight after being sentenced to prison for the rampage carried out by his son. The sources are telling NBC News that James Crumbley was caught making threats against the prosecutor who was trying him while on the phone with his sister. A jury found Crumbley guilty last week for 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. NBC News correspondent Adrian Broaddus joins us now from Chicago. Adrian, can you tell us about those threats? How many did he make here?
You know what, Gadi, we don't know how many calls were made, but we do know those calls date back to 2022. This was first reported by the Detroit Free Press, but our sources close with the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office tell us James Crumbley made threatening statements directed toward the prosecuting attorney, Karen McDonald. He allegedly told his sister in recorded jailhouse phone calls his goal in life was to destroy McDonald, that McDonald was going to hell soon, she better be scared, and she was done. Now, both attorneys, Crumbley's defense attorney as well as the prosecuting attorney, spoke with us before we knew the details of these threats. Listen in.
There's a disagreement about what was said and the nature of that stuff. We agreed to keep that out of the media, so I'm not going to comment any further on it.
He made a lot of threats, and I've decided that I'm not going to give him any more of my attention, and I don't think anybody should.
James Crumbley, along with his wife, are scheduled to be sentenced next month, potentially the first time seeing each other since the trial started. They could face up to 15 years in prison. Gadi?
Oh, wow. And so this was all going on during the trial. It's fascinating to hear about this now. We also know that some of the parents of the students that were killed, they want more accountability beyond what we've seen now from the parents as well as the shooter. What challenges are they facing right now?
They have an uphill battle. They say the conviction of James Crumbley and Jennifer and their son Ethan was the first step. Next, they want to hold school officials accountable. Specifically, they want to change the Michigan law that protects government employees from liability. They're calling for a state investigation into the shooting where teachers are required to participate, and they want to see legislation requiring an investigation after future school shootings. Here's more of what they told us.
If a school system wants to do their best, they're never going to do it, because if they do something wrong, they're going to be able to hide behind governmental immunity.
Accountability is not just a word that we've been throwing around loosely. I mean, it's what we want. It's absolutely necessary.
And we did receive a statement from the Attorney General in Michigan, Dana Nessel, saying in part twice she has tried to conduct an independent investigation, but in both instances, she says her offer to do that was, quote, soundly rejected by the school board. Gadi?
Adrian Broadus, thanks so much. And coming up, you know all those airline mishaps that we keep seeing? Well, in an NBC News exclusive, Lester Holt is going to sit down with the head of the FAA to ask about what's being done to keep passengers safe. But first, got to see this. Crews in Virginia were tackling a 150-acre fire when they had to make this unexpected rescue. They heard some yelping in the bush, and they found this bear cub hiding from the fire. They gave that little guy to the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources, where the cub will be nursed back to health and released back into the wild. I'll leave you with more of the story straight from the rescuers.
I was able to hold on to him, clasp him, and he actually was pretty calm. Didn't try to scratch me or anything. He actually almost seemed like he was asking for help.
Hey, welcome back. The latest legal twist in that controversial Texas immigration law is coming up. But first, here's some stories we're watching out in the West. A chaotic scene in a California courtroom today. A man on trial for killing his ex-girlfriend was able to slip through a lap restraint and stab his own lawyer with a pin before lunging for a prosecutor. Now, his lawyer wasn't hurt and then forgave his client, saying he felt, quote, no ill will towards him. But the man is now facing additional charges of attempted murder. And the lawyer for the accused murderer in those Idaho student killings is pushing back against a bill that would expand the state's death penalty. Brian Kohberger's lawyer appeared before an Idaho Senate committee last week, arguing the state was not staffed or prepared enough for a death penalty case that could take years to be resolved. She'd be the only lawyer in North Idaho qualified to lead a death penalty defense case. And the problems with Boeing planes don't seem to stop. A windshield of a Boeing plane cracked during an Alaska Airlines flight. It happened on the descent from a Washington, D.C. to Portland trip. Luckily, it landed safely and no one was hurt. The plane is now being taken in to be repaired. And now to an NBC News exclusive. America's top air safety official says Boeing is suffering from a culture of safety issues. It comes after FAA Administrator Michael Whitaker saw for himself Boeing's production lines and then sat down with NBC Nightly News anchor Lester Holt.
It's been 2 months since a door plug blew out of an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9, leaving Boeing once again under a microscope.
What we saw was not the safety culture that we were looking for.
I spoke to FAA Administrator Michael Whitaker today at Reagan National Airport about his recent visit to the Boeing factory floor.
There are issues around the safety culture in Boeing. Their priorities have been on production and not on safety and quality. And so what we really are focused on now is shifting that focus from production to safety and quality.
What were some of the things you saw that gave you concern?
Well, really looking for that indicator of a safety culture. So before going out on the floor of a manufacturing floor, you would expect a thorough safety briefing. That wasn't part of the process. And then reviewing the floor, expected a lot of conversation around quality assurance and safety. And again, that wasn't there. It was all about production. And there's nothing wrong with production, but it has to follow safety.
Were you a bit surprised that this would be happening, you, the top FAA person visiting, and something as simple as staging a safety briefing didn't take place?
I think it really shows how the mindset has been on production. And I think you would have expected at least more of a show of focus on safety, and that was lacking.
In a statement, Boeing says, "We are taking significant action to strengthen safety and quality at Boeing. We are focused on demonstrating change and building trust one airplane at a time. This increased scrutiny, whether from ourselves, from the FAA, or from others, will make us better." Have you seen anything that indicates that bad airplanes are leaving the factory, planes with safety of flight issues related to production?
There are not unsafe airplanes leaving that factory.
If you saw something that concerned you about the safety of planes leaving the factory, would you shut it down?
Absolutely.
Is Boeing too big to fail, in your opinion?
Economics isn't part of my portfolio, but I would say they're too big to not make a good airplane. They have all the resources they need. There's no reason they can't make a good airplane, and that's our focus right now.
You feel confident that Boeing will get its act together?
I don't think they have a choice, so I am confident they will.
Whitaker is also concerned about a series of aviation incidents, many involving United Airlines, from this older 777 that had a tire fall off in takeoff to this incident last Friday when a panel ripped off the fuselage of a jet. Whitaker says he spoke to United CEO Scott Kirby over the weekend.
I know that they're taking some heightened measures and looking at these issues. We're going to look at each one of these incidents and see if we see a pattern.
Did you express your concern?
He's concerned, I'm concerned. No one likes to see this spike of incidents. So we're both doing our jobs to look at where those risks might be.
In a letter to passengers, United says safety is our highest priority and is at the center of everything we do. What's your message to the flying public right now as they read some of these disturbing headlines we've been covering?
Well, they should know that the system is safe. It's still the safest way to travel, but we are working vigilantly to make sure it stays that way. This is an ongoing task. We're always looking for risks and addressing those risks.
And a very quick 180 from the Supreme Court on immigration could have some massive and immediate ramifications along the Texas border, with local police now cleared to arrest migrants crossing the border illegally. Last night, we told you how the Supreme Court had decided to effectively block that controversial SB 4 Act from going into effect while a lower court took up the case. But then today, we saw them decide to allow Texas to enforce their new law while it's being litigated. Now, the Supreme Court is split along ideological lines on today's ruling, 6 conservatives, 3 liberals. The White House today reacted, saying in part it will make communities less safe, burden law enforcement, and create chaos and confusion at the southern border. Meanwhile, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is calling this a huge win. And NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now. Danny, this is some major whiplash here. And before we say anything definite, is there a chance that we could see this blocked immediately again?
Oh, yes. I mean, we are in a giant Gordian knot of procedure here. And by that, I mean, this is one of those cases that comes along where you have a district court opinion, but then you have the next court up staying that opinion. Then you have a stay of a stay, and then the Supreme Court issues a stay. But now that stay has been vacated. And anytime I say stay, you're pausing something, and that pause is a pause on something else. So it gets really, really complicated. But the bottom line is that this case is not over. All it really means is that going forward in the immediate future, Texas can now effectively enforce its own criminal law that really appears to be in conflict with federal immigration law. And really, for centuries, it's been the case that the federal government decides issues of immigration. Because if the states did it, you'd create a patchwork that would be a giant disaster. And they say as much in the opinion, in the case law, that, look, how would that look if, say, a country like Russia wanted to negotiate immigration policy, and then they had to go to Georgia, and then they had to go to Mississippi, and then they go to Oklahoma, or a landlocked state that really has no other country borders? It would be a mess. And that's why normally federal government on immigration is supreme.
Speaking of case law, I think back to 2012, the Supreme Court striking down Arizona's SB 1070. It was the Show Me Your Papers law back then. Arizona and Texas bills, they look very, very similar. They're basically the same concept. What does this say about the Supreme Court then and now? And I know that technically this is a pause, but can we read into the way things are going?
Boy, I'm going to get yelled at for this one, but I wouldn't necessarily read into this decision by the Supreme Court to essentially stay out of it as a final decision. By the way, you definitely know where some of the justices stand. They wrote a dissenting opinion. There you see the pages of the opinion. But, you know, the dissenting justices essentially wrote their final opinion when and if this ever gets back to the Supreme Court. Whereas the majority justices, the conservative majority that you see right there on the left, they really didn't decide anything on the merits. They're really just declining to hear it at this stage. So really, they may go the other way ultimately when the case gets up to the Supreme Court. But we already know where 3 justices are going to vote. We just don't know exactly what the conservative wing of the Supreme Court would do. Now, people with a rather jaundiced view of this might say they've already signaled how they're going to go, and maybe that's true. But this case is not over yet. It just does mean that for now, Texas is able to enforce a law that really on its face seems to conflict with federal immigration law.
Danny Savalos, thank you so much. So just to recap there, so far 3 hard no's, 6 we're going to continue to wait and see. Danny, we'll be checking back with you. Thanks. And migrants in Chicago are slowly getting evicted from city-run shelters there. The controversial policy gives migrants 60 days to stay at a shelter before they have to leave. They can then reapply for another shelter for another 60-day stay. And according to the city of Chicago, there are currently more than 10,000 migrants in 23 city and state shelters. More than 37,000 migrants have arrived in Chicago since 2022. And NBC News correspondent Valerie Castro has more.
Gadi, like so many other cities that have taken in migrants, the city of Chicago says it is running out of resources and running out of space. This plan to evict migrants was actually in the works for quite some time, but it kept getting delayed until the city began enforcing it just within the last few days. But migrants say the process has been confusing, and some say they just have no place to go. The city is making some exceptions for migrants, like those who have medical conditions, those who are pregnant, and those with families with small children. The city says they can apply for an extension of up to 30 days. But one of the problems that advocates say migrants are dealing with, one of the obstacles, is that they are trying to find work. But migrants who apply for asylum have to wait 150 days until they are eligible for a work permit. But migrants say if they could work, if they could earn money, then they could potentially pay for housing. Take a listen to what advocates have to say.
It's a lot of not good answers, and people out there are being left in the street. We think that if folks aren't able to get work authorization, they don't have rental assistance, they're most likely ending up homeless.
Some migrants could try to re-enter the shelter system at a different location. They will be reprocessed. Some migrants may choose to leave the city altogether. Further complicating things, the city of Chicago is dealing with a measles outbreak, and at least 10 cases have been linked to one of the shelters. The mayor says his goal is to have every migrant who is staying in a shelter to be vaccinated. The city is warning that more than 2,000 migrants can expect to be evicted by the end of April. Gadi.
Valerie Castro, thanks so much. And still ahead, a woman in Australia is caught on tape stretching. That's her, stretching. Looks like she's going for a run or something. No, she's preparing to commit a burglary. The story is wild. We've got that and much more in headlines from around the world when we come back. Stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. President Biden and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu butt heads over Israel's planned ground invasion of the city of Rafah. We're going to have a full report on that coming right up. But first, let's take a quick look around the world. The situation in Haiti is getting worse, with heavily armed gangs in control of most of the capital, and they now are smashing up power stations and leaving parts of the country in the dark. Meanwhile, the Biden administration has requested $40 billion in aid to Haiti, but Republicans in Congress are blocking it. And another Caribbean country is dealing with blackouts right now, and that is Cuba, where protesters are taken to the streets. Protests are illegal in Cuba, and the last time we saw them were massive demonstrations way back in 2021 during the COVID lockdowns, which ended up being the largest anti-government protest there since the revolution. And this story is insane. This is a woman in Australia who is doing some early morning yoga. If we could pull up that video right before she breaks into a pastry shop and she robs it. She is stretching before she does that. That happened earlier this month. The owners of the bakery say they were surprised when they checked the surveillance footage and they saw the woman doing all that stretching. The suspect, who has been dubbed the, quote, flexible bandit, was charged with theft and burglary. Nama, steal your stuff. And the International Olympic Committee says that athletes from Russia and Belarus won't be taking part in this summer's opening ceremonies, even though they can still compete in the Olympic Games as neutral athletes. That means no flag, no emblems, anthems, or any identifying symbols of either Russia or Belarus. And then there's the whole matter of the IOC blasting Russia's plan to host the, quote, friendship games shortly after the Paris Olympics, calling it a, quote, cynical attempt by the Russian Federation to politicize sport. Back to some election results right now. We've got the Ohio Republican Senate primary race, one that we've been watching very closely. If we can pull up that board right now, we've got Bernie Moreno, the winner. He is the projected winner there. The favorite from former President Trump to win. He's got, right now, it's 27% of the vote in, 43% for Moreno, 35 for Dolan. The difference there, 23,000 votes. But right now, even with 27% in, the projected winner from NBC News is Bernie Moreno with 140,000 votes so far. And going back international, the World Health Organization says widespread famine is imminent in Gaza as Israel weighs a new offensive in Rafah, despite U.S. warnings not to move forward. NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez is in Tel Aviv with the latest.
President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu now on a diplomatic collision course over Israeli plans to mount a new ground offensive into the city of Rafah in southern Gaza, where more than 1 million Palestinian civilians are sheltering. President Biden, in his first phone call with the Israeli leader in more than a month yesterday, saying that such an offensive would be a mistake and that there are alternative ways for Israel to achieve its goal of destroying Hamas without going into Rafah full force. Prime Minister Netanyahu today speaking in front of an Israeli parliamentary committee, defiant, saying there is no alternative other than a ground offensive into Rafah to destroy what he says are the 4 remaining Hamas battalions still in that city. Now, the next step here is Israel has agreed to send a delegation of military, intelligence, humanitarian officials to Washington to hear out the White House's concerns, see if there is some kind of compromise that can be reached here. But other than that, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying the only thing that will even delay an attack on Rafah is a breakthrough in those ongoing ceasefire negotiations happening right now in Qatar. Qatari officials say they are cautiously optimistic, but we have been here again and again and again with the sides coming to the negotiating table and leaving without a deal. There is fresh urgency about a ceasefire right now following that UN-backed report, which says more than half the people in Gaza are suffering from catastrophic levels of hunger, and they say that famine is now imminent in the north of the Strip. Raf Sanchez, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
And going to jail for faking a vaccine status is one thing, but going to jail for faking vaccinations, if you were the president of one of the largest countries in the world, that's next level. And that is what former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro is facing after he was indicted on charges of falsifying his COVID-19 vaccination status. Now, this is Bolsonaro's first indictment that accuses him and 16 others of putting false information into public health databases for more than a year to make it seem like he and his 12-year-old daughter had been vaccinated. Police say this included falsifying data before coming to the United States, since he needed that vaccine certificate to come here back in 2022. He's now facing up to 12 years in jail if convicted. Now, the irony here is Bolsonaro has always been an anti-vaxxer and was very, very outspoken during the pandemic about not getting the COVID vaccination and downplaying the severity of the virus. In a statement, his lawyer says Bolsonaro was exonerated from showing any kind of certificate on trips because he was the president, and calls the indictment political persecution. Bolsonaro has also denied any wrongdoing. And NBC News correspondent David Noriega joins us now. David, how did investigators even find out about the fake data here?
So the evidence in this case comes from that public health database that the federal Brazilian government ran. And what we know in this case so far is that the federal police in Brazil say they have evidence that Bolsonaro, as the sitting president, either input fake data or had other people input fake data on his behalf. That, as you pointed out, was potentially necessary for him to be able to travel to the United States, which he did pretty much immediately after he lost his bid for re-election. He spent a few months in exile in Florida and Miami mostly, including the last few days of his actual presidential term in office.
Well, was this a matter of comparing like the database with his public statement saying, I have not been vaccinated? And then it's like, wait a minute, hold on. He's in the database. Let's ask some questions here.
Yeah, the extent of the publicly available evidence on Bolsonaro's position on vaccinations is
no secret.
Yeah, it's no secret there. You know, he's been making public declarations, sort of bombastic public declarations about this for years. He was, I think, arguably the world's most prominent and powerful anti-vaxxer.
And we said first indictment, he's looking at a bunch of different legal troubles. What else is, I guess, on the docket for him?
Yeah, you know, a lot of world leaders over the years have been compared to Donald Trump, and often those comparisons don't actually make that much sense. In the case of Bolsonaro, there are, in fact, a lot of really remarkable parallels, including the fact that there are numerous criminal investigations against him, right? They range from the sort of frivolous and weird, like he was pretty recently accused of harassing a humpback whale off the coast of Sao Paulo state, to the very serious and high stakes for Brazilian democracy. Remember, this is the fourth largest democracy in the world, and some of the most serious investigations into Bolsonaro involve his alleged attempts to stage a coup after his failure to win re-election, and the famous January 8th in Brasilia, which was the equivalent of our January 6th, where there was a pretty big riot, a pretty damaging riot on the streets of the capital city. Now, this is the first criminal case that has actually led to an indictment, but there are many more waiting in the wings. And again, it's comparable to Trump in the sense that this is maybe not the most significant one. It's just the first to actually progress to this stage. And last thing I'll say, just like Trump, we're not just talking about Bolsonaro the man, we're also talking about Bolsonarismo, the political movement that he inspired.
It's Brazilian MAGA.
Exactly. And remarkably similar to MAGA ideologically in terms of its composition. Regardless of what happens with Bolsonaro the man, Bolsonarismo will in one way or another prevail.
Minus the humpback whale.
Minus the humpback whale. I don't know what happened to that whale, but I would like to find out.
We'll keep tracking. Thanks so much, David.
You got it.
And before we go, it is time for the future of everything. And tonight we are taking you to the South by Southwest Festival in Austin, Texas, which also happens to be ground zero for an underground Bitcoin hub. We're going to take a closer look at the future of cryptocurrency coming up right after the break. And tonight in the future of everything, we are wrapping up our coverage of this year's South by Southwest Festival with a focus on Bitcoin. We got an inside look at the cryptocurrency's biggest underground meetups in Austin, and that's a place that's quickly becoming a Bitcoin hotspot. CNBC's Mackenzie Sigalos tells us about this possible crypto comeback.
I'm here in Austin, a place that's widely regarded as the Bitcoin capital of the U.S. Bear or bull market, Bitcoiners have flocked to this city because of a combination of pro-crypto policies, abundant renewable energy, and an ever-growing network of some of the brightest developers and miners on the planet.
Bitcoin was founded in 2009. A lot's happened post-financial crisis. Austin was already emerging as that tech center, and enter Bitcoin, and it just became the logical home.
The clubhouse for all these Bitcoiners is a place called the Bitcoin Commons, which is on the city's iconic Congress Avenue that leads to the Texas state capitol in the heart of downtown.
We help early companies co-work out of here that don't necessarily have the means or funding to have a full office.
The Bitcoin Commons hosts a regular monthly meetup called BitDevs. Here, people talk about everything from code to concerns that the Microsoft-run GitHub may pose a greater existential threat to the Bitcoin network, since much of the development work is carried out on that platform.
There's not a great South by Southwest Bitcoin track, and so we host the Bitcoin Takeover here in Austin.
Another part of the Bitcoin programming in Austin focused on a major hackathon. Francisco Chavarria was born in Mexico, spent time in Salt Lake City, but 3 years ago he made the move to Austin to be a part of a community of like-minded thinkers. His company, Yopaki, which is a neobank for Bitcoin focused on the Latin American market, just won first place in the hackathon.
If you talk to other builders in the competition, a lot happens here. There definitely is a sense of, I don't need for others to lose for me to win. There really is a relationship and a collaboration for Bitcoin to succeed. Right now, it feels like we're all winning because of the price, but those of us who have been building in the bear market, we know.
The VC appetite for Bitcoin projects building on top of the blockchain is really heating up. Grant Gilliam spent 15 years working in private equity in New York before pivoting to run a Bitcoin VC fund called 1031. Since launching, it's invested $125 million of equity in aggregate over the last 5 years.
We invest across the Bitcoin ecosystem, across every major theme. Anything that is relevant to Bitcoin infrastructure, we like to say the picks and shovels of companies building products and services for holders of Bitcoin.
Meanwhile, Bitcoin mining remains a big part of the narrative when it comes to Texas. Every 4 years, Bitcoin undergoes a market-making event known as the halving. It cuts the production of new Bitcoin in half, and it's typically come before a major run-up in the price of Bitcoin. But for some miners, it may prove an Armageddon-level event. West Texas miner Jamie McCavity has a 60-megawatt mine that runs on a part of the grid that is 90% powered by a mix of solar and wind power.
This go around, if prices and difficulty stay where they are, it's not going to be that big of a deal. I project very few miners will come offline if price and difficulty stay where they are as of right now.
Number goes up is a big mantra in the Bitcoin space, but as the community evolves, so too does the thinking about the price of Bitcoin.
Price is the best indicator of more people coming to the conclusion that Bitcoin is money and it's a better store of value, so it is very relevant. It's just the output of a lot of hard work, a lot of trial and error, and the output of labor of a lot of good people.
The great Bitcoin halving. Remember, that is like 38 days away, 4/20. We'll be checking back then. That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.